So here's a patch that is dawless, and when you're using modular, usually this side of the process could be more inspiring than when you're working in the DAW, because you can find accidental timbres or whatnot. However, something people don't talk about a lot is how do you get from this stage to then go into the DAW, if that be what you want. So if you don't want to just do dawless jamming and you want to then take this into the DAW, then a good place to start would be everything that is like clocks or pitch information. Although it's really up to you. You can even have a hybrid setup where you're using signals from your DAW to control voltage stuff from your dawless setup. Say for example, this oscillator here, I can change the pitch with my hardware setup, the way I have it configured. But I can also just come out of the DAW and send it, regular MIDI pitch information. So it kind of depends. I can either take gate signals to my control voltage to hit these buttons. Of course, I'll be limited to those two notes. But I can also take, if I wanted to play an entire melody in MIDI or something like that, I can take all of that information and just send it straight to my oscillator. But really, limitation sometimes sparks inspiration. So it depends on what you want. There's no right or wrong way to do anything, especially in a hybrid setup as nebulous as this. But for example, if I take just an offset voltage and send it to my master VCO here, which is acting as the clock for this whole setup. Let's see, we'll go to CV. And now notice I've changed the entire clock for essentially the tempo of what's happening. So now I can just remove this and I've still preserved the main clock to this patch. But if all I wanted to do was get it to the DAW side, then I can use VCV-Rack or CV tools, built-in Ableton or whatever. There's some form of tool that you can send to some form of hardware, and I just happen to have the Expert Sleepers ES3 through ADAT. So it's as simple as routing my Ableton channels out to an external channel. So for example here, if I turn to Ableton's screen recording now, don't worry about this. This is just the module recording the audio so I can put this video together. But if you look here, I made this device where it's pretty simple. All it does is it takes this MIDI track and it takes the C3 note and the D3 note and it turns them into triggers. And it's that simple. There's like a ton of different ways this could have been achieved, but this device is working. And so if I turn back to the modular view now, I tempo matched my DAW to be the exact same as this analog oscillator, which was acting as my clock. So now all I have to do is reroute. Sorry, I don't need to disconnect this cable. I need to reroute these to be the exact same as they were with that oscillator. Make sure that's correct. Okay, should be correct. So now the same thing's happening. In my DAW, I can turn up the tempo or turn it down. But essentially now my patch is DAW integrated as far as clock information. And not only that, if you look at my device here, the way it's working is I'm using MIDI, right? And so in the analog version, when I had the analog oscillator clocking the patch, it was essentially just a square wave, and the falling edge was triggering one side of the envelopes and the rising edge was triggering the other side. And so basically I can change that now. Before they were locked in this grid where the main frequency would have to be, you know, one frequency, and then the rising edge and the falling edge essentially divides that frequency in half. But since it's just MIDI, I can switch to something like this. And so now we have just crossed the threshold on the dawless patch to now it's assisted by my DAW. But I'm not doing anything like totally insane yet, because once you have the DAW integrated, really the sky's the limit and you can do whatever you want. But in this case, to get an offset pattern like this, I couldn't have used a pulse wave with the rising and falling edge like I was. So, and if you look at my device here, I also have some extra goodies over here where I can change the pulse amount. And since this is in Ableton, I've actually mapped this to an Ableton device with presets, which we'll get back to later, because that can be accessed instantly at the DAW side when I'm using an external controller like Lemur or the Push or something like that, any kind of MIDI controller. So it goes full circle, round and around, where you develop your patch, your sounds and whatnot, and then you also start to consider performance, because you don't want to walk back and forth to the computer, and you kind of just want to stay in front of your modular where all the sounds are happening, so that way you can make changes in real time. So since we're integrated with the DAW now, I can throw in some DAW tracks and start jamming this way. Made a very quick interface where I can control Ableton's clip launching. I can also access that recognize it's that old pattern. This was the pattern that was essentially from the analog oscillator, and I mapped it to the device in Ableton. So now this has become part of my hardware performance.